Hello, everyone. Welcome again. So, today we're going to be continuing on our discussion on oppositions in astrology. So, in the last one, we'd kind of seen what the four major types of oppositions in astrology. And today, in fact, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my own birth chart as well and using that as an example to describe how you, if you have oppositions in your chart, can get over them as well, or at least find a way to merge them in a way that it's actually productive and it's not fighting each other. So, because this interests a lot of people, I picked up the Mars Venus opposition. And not just the fact that it interests a lot of people, it's probably I would say, the easiest way for someone who's new to astrology to kind of get interested in it. Also, to delve deep into it because Mars and Venus are the easiest planets to kind of understand, right? Like Mars represents your masculinity, represents your aggression, your drive, your ability to instigate and start things, while Venus, on the other hand, is the divine feminine. It has everything which Mars doesn't. It has grace, it rules art, it rules beauty, it rules our senses, everything that's sensual, everything that's uh, everything that's also luxurious in life. Because luxury, or yeah, you can say luxury is a refinement of everyday life to an extent that everyday life starts to become beautiful, tasteful in a way that you are only choosing that which is of the highest order. And what does the highest order mean? Which has been refined to a level where only the best is accepted and the rest is generally not. So, Venus, in a certain way, can get a bit pompous as well or shallow in certain signs and in certain placements. But in others, it can get really spiritual as well. Like when it goes into Pisces, it can get really artistic as well. So, in this kind of scenario, how do you, if you have oppositions in your chart, deal with this? How do you overcome them? So, we've spoken about the four types. That is, that either it's going to be a slow moving one, either it's going to be a medium paced one, or it's going to be a fast moving opposition, which a lot of psychologists might call as being bipolar. Or it could be the fourth type, which occurs in my chart, that it happens after a certain level of maturity in your life, which means that when you grow up, your adult chart suddenly shows up with oppositions which were not there in the birth chart, and things get yeah, quite different, or yeah, they become strangely interesting to handle, we can say. So yeah, what do you do with them? So before yeah, we get into this Mars and Venus thing, the opposition, I would like to say that the whole idea behind oppositions is to not fight them or to not take sides with them as well, because that's what they kind of want us to do. You could almost call it as yeah, someone who's picking you up for a fight. Now they want you to fight back so that the momentum is there, and that the the game can be played more and more and more. But what you want to do is you want to get over them. So you want to try to kind of understand them, live it out in a way that you're living it out consciously, that you're understanding what's happening inside them in a way that you transcend them, in a way that you bring them together, an amalgamation of both the opposing forces, both the opposing planet, to a level, to a degree where they transcend what they originally were in your birth chart and end up being a conjunction, which means they come together, they become a molecule. Before, they were atoms which were at odds with each other. You want them to rise up, become a molecule, so that they become a superpower for you. They become a force to be reckoned with. And that is what you want to do with your oppositions. So I'll just pull out my birth chart and I'll tell you about kind of how I went about dealing with my Mars and Venus opposition. Now, why I'm using the past tense is that right now, personally, or I feel that my Idal chart, which is the ninth harmonic, is kind of what is active. Because after a certain, you would call age, or after certain cycles, you tend to overcome your birth chart, and your birth chart's always going to be active. I'm not saying it's deactivated, but I'm just saying something else is more predominant and more urgent for you to deal with. That becomes your adult chart, which is your ninth harmonic, and your 10th harmonic, which is your kind of professional chart or your career chart or your, you can say, obligation to society chart as well. Or like in my case, what I'm here on earth to do, my obligation to the universe for bringing me here, for allowing me to come here. So yeah, these are the charts that get active after a certain period of time in your life, and they start to become more important. But before that, you have to get over your birth chart. Some things in your birth chart which are icky, which are difficult to scratch. But remember, if you kind of are able to get over some things in your birth chart, it gets very easy when you become an adult to handle oppositions later or whatever comes up later. So I'll just pull this one up, and here we go. Where do we have my, I'm going to first pull out my birth chart here. Let me pull out this off on full screen. There you go. Yeah, that is my birth chart. Yeah. Sagittarian sun, as you could probably tell, with sun in the first house in Sagittarius, and not more. But more importantly, for today's discussion, we are speaking about this line. Yeah, right here. Now, this is what an opposition is going to look like in your chart. If you could maybe pull out your chart, if you need some help, you can just write it down in the comments, and next time I'll post the link as well for where you can get a free birth chart done. Yeah, that's your line out here. Now this is the big bad opposition. Now what you need to look for is, now what are the planets which are opposing it? As you can see, there's Mars out here in the sign of Cancer, and here you've got yourself Venus. Though Neptune and Uranus are close by, they're not exactly opposing because they're far away. If you could see, this is 16 degrees Uranus and 17 degrees Neptune. We're focusing on Venus here. Here you go. Yeah, the green one. The green one, Venus at 26 degrees, because out here at 27 degrees is Mars. Mars in Cancer. So now, how did I deal with this opposition? How did I kind of, get through it? How did I get over it? And you can do the same. So when you see an opposition in your chart, you kind of want to make sure that you are studying their qualities very well. Now I'll pull this down and I'll start talking, and I'll come back to this when we delve deep into like what are the other things that you need to look at, because it's not just the opposition. There are a lot of other lines going on, right? You need to start to look at them as well. Now, what is most important in an opposition is you need to see your degrees. Now, in my case, the first thing I did is to see that Mars is strategically placed at 27 degrees. And while that is the exact point of its debilitation, which means its weakest point, Mars is at its weakest point out there. But what happens is, this is how you're going to deal with your opposition. There's always going to be one very weak planet and one very strong planet, at least in most cases. Yeah. So if you've got this kind of an opposition, it's actually there's a knack to it. If you could do it, you could get over it in like no time, literally no time. In a few years, you'll be like wrapped up with it. You'd have mastered that quality, and yeah, you can use it as your superpower after that. Now, when I saw that my Mars is in that kind of a situation, it's exactly at its weakest point. What I did is I took my energy out of it completely, because that's what it wants you to do. Now, the more you're trying to go and put your energy there, the more it's like a sinking black hole, because it's already at its weakest. It doesn't want to be bothered. Now, what does this mean in a larger cycle? Especially when you start doing multiple charts of a person, of yourself, you start to see that everything is a cycle. If something's weak, that means it is basically tired. It was actually overexerted before. Now it just wants to rest. Now you do not want to go and wake it up, because at a later point in your time, in your life, it is going to be waking up, or in a future life, if you will, it is going to be waking up and it wants to run at that time. So you want to give it the rest it needs. So what I did with my Mars is Mars in the sign of Cancer now, and it's in the eighth house. The eighth house is the house of the other. It's the house of sex, but it's also the house of other people's possessions. So what you do is you need to see the axis. Now, Mars is in the eighth house, other people's house of possessions, opposing Venus, which is in the second house of Capricorn, in my house of possessions. Now, when Venus comes into my house of possessions, that's the second house, those are my assets, those are my uh, creations, those are my possessions, they are things I value in life. Yeah. So now, being in the sign of Capricorn, which is the sign of building, which is the sign of construction, which is the sign of building solidity, ruled by Saturn. Now, what I looked at was that Mars is in Cancer. It's extremely weak, but it's strategically weak, because it's exactly at its debilitation degree, that is 27 degrees. Mars exactly gets debilitated there. So, out of these two planets, I can almost stop looking at one as an opposition if I completely remove my energy from it. Now, I did this very consciously. The more I studied it, the more I realized that my Mars in other people's possessions just has to be allowed to go out calmly. Now, what does that mean? It means that you're always going to have this kind of a question with yourself. If it's the first house and the seventh house, that is yourself and your relationships, there's always going to be some kind of strategy you'll have to use to get your energy to one place and then operate from there to maybe create a certain level of balance, but because you need a certain standing point. So what I kind of did was I took my Mars energy out from other people's, or you can say joint possessions. Now, all of us have joint possessions, right? There's something that you possess, but there's also something that you possess with someone else. Like maybe there's a joint bank account. Maybe there's, yeah, I mean, if you're already, in a partnership, in a relationship, you are sharing things, right? You're probably sharing a house together. You're probably sharing, there's so many things you share, right, with people. So in this case, what that opposition was kind of doing is, like now that I look back at it, is that wherever were my possessions in other people's or houses, or you can say joint possessions with other people, they were really stagnated. They really needed to get revamped. They were really they were not very good places. That is not where I would ideally want my assets to be, or those are not actually the partnerships with people which I would have liked So that was kind of my, what would you call as the first half of life. So I had to kind of remove those. I had to kind of let go of my energy. And with Mars being in Cancer, it's very easy to let go because your Mars is not forcing anything. You've got to look at what is its strength. Mars in Cancer, the strength is its surrender, its ability to let go of that, which is not its. Now, by doing that, by saying that anything which I didn't create by myself, I don't want. This was literally my mantra. Like I was chanting this all the time, like literally, like drilling this into my own brain, into my mind, that anything which I didn't create, I do not want. I was literally drilling this. Now, how does this help? Now, this helps because what happens is by doing that, let me come back to my chart. Sorry. Yeah. By doing that, what is um, I apologize. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I'm going to keep this on. Yeah. So by doing that, what happens is that when you take your energy out of this place, this is where the Mars is, in other people's houses, in the 8th house, as you can see. When you take your energy out of one place, you can bring your energy to the opposite place. That is the 2nd house of my own self-created possessions. That's where my Venus is. Now, what it allowed me to do is by withdrawing from my joint assets, which I had with people I didn't want to have joint assets with, any associations with. So I had to cut off a lot of things which I felt were not going to go ahead well, which was not the direction that, my, you can say, money or my possessions should be in. So generally in such cases, in 2nd and 8th house, you generally have some kind of disputes with either inheritance or mostly inheritance, I think. Yeah, mostly inheritance. You also have, sometimes can have issues with taxes. Not sometimes, on a large extent, there could be issues with taxes. Why? Because taxes are other people's money and your hand in them, right? Your hand in the money of the collective. Your hand in the money of the whole society, because the tax that you pay are helping, or at least supposed to help, in the cause of the protection and propagation and development of the community that you live in. So it's your share, right? So it's kind of your share within the share of everybody else. So rather than cutting on your taxes, or rather than trying to have a bigger share in your inheritance in this kind of situation, it would be best to withdraw. It would be best to just pay whatever there is and get away from it. Why? Because you're going to go into a very beautiful new society. And why is that so? Because you've got your Venus here in the house of Capricorn, which is self-built. Capricorn likes to build things on itself. And with Venus there, it's going to build beautiful possessions of its own, out of its own self efforts. It's going to secrete some, like how the spider makes its own web, and then it's able to, crawl across its own web. It's basically roaming around in its own possessions, right? The web was created by the spider. It's roaming around in it absolutely freely. So this kind of works in that fashion, that if you can withdraw your energy from other people's possessions, you can kind of bring that energy back into your possessions. And when you bring that energy to your possessions, what happens is that your possessions tends to grow. And why is that so? Because whatever you had to pay in terms of, you can say, karma or debt, or karma or debt has already been paid, because you withdrew from it. You withdrew the uh, you withdrew the stance that you were taking there. You withdrew the stance of saying that, oh, I need my fair share. I need my I need my fair share. There's actually, in such cases, there's no need to look for a fair share, because you're giving you're it's let me put it this let me give it another way. Say, for example, you're in a job, and you are in a state where you feel like, yes, you are working a little bit more than what you're being paid. But if you were to ask for a so-called raise, or your fair share, as they say, right? In such cases, if you were to ask for it, what would happen is you would be plundered with more work that you do not actually like. It would not be work that you like that would be given to you in such a situation. Why? Because the joint assets is actually corrupted. So you would have to do stuff which you really don't like, or you feel very unethical about. So in a situation like this, rather than asking for a raise, you would rather withdraw and get into a mode of surrender, in a way that you just let that job drift the way it has to, and focus yourself on some new business or some entrepreneurial idea that you would like to start. Why? Because see, money is energy, and energy is basically, when energy gets converted into money, it's basically just condensing, very denser reality. So it's basically value that your energy is getting, uh, your energy is generating value. The value is being viewed as, in a denser realm, as money. So that money in this opposition, rather than coming from other people's resources in the so-called job, will end up coming from your own entrepreneurial venture, from your own, you can say, business, from your own. Could be anything. For me, it's a show, a musical show. But for you, it could just be anything that you start by yourself. The same money would show up much more easily there, because the Saturn would really help you do that here. So if you are dealing with an opposition, these are the ways you need to look at it. That, where do I draw my energy out? Where do I not need to put energy? Because basically, opposition means two things are at loggerheads with each other. When I started to surrender my Mars out there, it got extremely easy. I could do this. It didn't take very long to get over this so-called opposition. Now, the more that I studied it, and the more that I understood the energetics of it, because my action was reaping instant rewards, in that I could see that, okay, I'm withdrawing and I can immediately see something happening. I can immediately see something positive going on. So what happened, especially with this, is I started to see deeper into the chart, and you will as well. Even if you're not an astrologer, you'll start to see deeper into your life's purpose on a generic level, which might eventually align with astrology, but it doesn't have to be that this is your way of dissecting life. This is, for me, I use this as a way of dissecting life, because, as I've said in the first episode, it's the same as music. So music theory and astrology is literally the same. So what I understand in music, I kind of get here as well. So it's easy. And that's why I share it for free, because I feel I owe it for how much it has helped me. So, yes, in this case, I'm using my chart as an example, because I guess the more charts you guys might start to provide, I could start using yours as examples and demonstrate if you're willing enough. But let me take the first step and use mine, because I don't fancy using what you call as celebrity charts. I'd rather do it with mine. So how this works is, you need to start to look at the other lines. As we spoke about it, the first step is that you realize that this is your big opposition, the central one. Now, as you can see, there's a full diagram around it, right? Now, this opposition is basically being held in place because of this other diagram that you see around it. Doesn't this look like a kite for you? If it does, it's exactly what it's called in astrology. It's called a kite formation because it is a kite. Now, what does the kite formation do? The kite formation starts to involve other planets. If you could see, there's Mars out here. Okay. And when I come here, there's Pluto out here as well. And when I go to the bottom of this is where I start to see that that's my Venus. And at the top of the kite is my Mars. So what I started to realize was that if I were to withdraw my Mars, where is my energy actually going? Is it directly going to Venus? If it's going opposite and going directly to Venus, then it's going to directly come back to Mars after some time. And that is not what we want. We do not want polarization. We want complete freedom. We want mastery. We want amalgamation of the energies, not some temporary relief. So the more I started to withdraw my Mars, I realized that it's not exactly going to Venus. It is showing up in my life as Venus in this way that my possessions, which I possessed earlier, were gone, and the possessions that I possess now in the new me are kind of designed by me, are kind of what I want, are kind of how my sense of design works, because I come from the arts background as well, right? And Venus in Capricorn is that way. So that is obviously what I like. So yeah, so it was coming up in a nice way. But what I did notice is it wasn't coming directly, it was kind of coming indirectly. So what is actually happening is that this Mars out here, when I withdrew, it was going towards the planet with the most amount of gravity. Now, within this whole structure, this kite formation, who do you think is the strongest planet? Is it Mars in Venus? Sorry, is it Mars in Cancer? No, that's the weakest planet. That's why I targeted that and surrendered it first. Is it my moon in Aries? Moon in Aries is strong, but there are things which are much stronger than that. Is it Venus in Capricorn? Venus is generally strong in Capricorn, but is it the strongest? No. Which is the strongest here? It's actually Pluto, because Pluto is in its own house in Scorpio. And moreover, it's in the 12th house of consciousness. So it is the planet which has the most amount of vision out here, because it has the most amount of height. It has the most amount of latitude. It has the most amount of altitude here, because it's so high up there in consciousness, or you can say it's so deep there in the underground, in the realms of hell, or in the very root of your own being, that it has the most amount of vantage power. That is, it's like you're on a helicopter. Don't you think you're going to be the one who's going to be able to see everything rather than the people on the ground who are seeing horizontally? And the same goes even in the other way, is that if you're like 10,000 feet under the earth, you're going to see every structure's roots which is coming down. You're going to see the bottoms of every building which is being built, right? Like you just look up and you're able to, of course there's strata and there's mud and all, but I'm just giving it like an example. Say you're under the earth, you're just below the realm where you can see things, and you're basically able to see how deep are things, right? How deep the roots of the buildings are. How deep is the root of a 100-story skyscraper as opposed to a 3-story building. So you're able to see the roots of everything. And that is where this Pluto actually is. It's actually very deep and very high, both in consciousness. And it has the most amount of gravity as well. Why? Because it's the one in its own house. Everybody else is just in other people's houses. They might be friends, but there's nothing like being in your own house, is it? So what I kind of realized is that this Mars, which I surrendered in this formation, was actually going all the way to Pluto. It was getting sucked in by Pluto. It was literally getting sucked in by Pluto. And there was another hidden sign there. Why I said surrender. There are other words to be used as well. Why did I stress on surrender? Because surrender can travel through water, because water is an element of surrender. As you can see here, there's Cancer. It's the Mars out here. It's in Cancer. Here, it's in Cancer. And the Pluto out here is in Scorpio. So it's going from water to water. Moreover, it's going from cardinal water to stable water. Going from cardinal water, that is instigating water at Cancer. That is why Cancer is about emotion. It's about the initial emotion as well. And going to the most stable point of water, which is where Pluto lies, which is in Scorpio. That's why Scorpio is also associated with revenge or revenge. Why? Or sting. Why? Because the emotions that come to Scorpio do not get forgotten. They crystallize. They use negativity as the very building blocks of the foundation on which their lives are built. So negativity for them is not negative. It's what runs through their very veins. They use that as a life force. They use emotion as a driving force. Now, in such a chart, it is very easy to surrender and take it there, because that is a very stable point. It's in the consciousness realm. It's a very stable point to take it to. So while I wasn't very sure about all this before I did that, no, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are not, but while doing it, I kind of realized that it's kind of going here. It's going to the stable point. Now, how did it surface into my assets? It surfaced into my assets because if you can see from this Pluto out here, there's a blue line going to, from this Pluto here, there's a blue line going to my Venus at 26 degrees. Pluto's at 23 degrees Scorpio. Venus is at 26 degrees Capricorn. If you count the houses, it's Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn. It's basically 2 houses apart, right? Sagittarius and Capricorn, 2 houses apart, 60 degrees apart. To be precise, it's 63 degrees apart. 23 degrees Scorpio to 26 degrees Capricorn. Anything which is roughly 60 degrees apart would have these blue lines in your chart. They're called as sextiles or easy aspects, which means energy flows very easily between them. It's the most easiest way in which energy can flow. So you see how you can actually tackle an opposition in a very interesting way. That you surrender, that the opposition was between Mars and Venus, it was between masculinity and femininity. You surrender one, it went to the point, it got sucked in by the most strongest planet within this structure, this light structure. Went to my Pluto, and from the Pluto, it just got sent very easily to my Venus, which is what I wanted, right? That in the realm of possessions, see, your fight in an opposition is always going to be about the houses it relates to. If it's in something like this, which is second house and the eighth house, it's generally always going to be about possessions. It's always going to be about who owns what. That's generally what the fight is going to be about, or the opposition is going to be about. So there are millions of ways of doing it. But in this case, what I unconsciously did, and I feel what many others can actually make use of, is that this just got done without any fights. This got done in the most, I would like to use conniving as a word, but it wasn't conniving. In the most subtle, but I wouldn't say naive, because it's a strategy. It was a strategy. It was a way of taking your energies out of things you don't want, taking it back home to Pluto in Scorpio, in consciousness, a place where nobody can see what you're doing, and then transferring that energy back into your possessions in a place where to the outside world it looks as if it's self made. It is true that it's self made, but it completely negated the need to have this fight in public, in the open world. By surrendering, you let go of that Mars, which is still waiting in other people's possessions. It went up to Pluto, your very root. It's more like, if I have to give a more practical example, it's more like, say there are two plants, which, let me just animate things. So there are two buildings, okay? Two buildings or two plants which are kind of fighting each other as to who wants to get more taller, or that they're, crossing on each other's properties. That's what it is, right? It's all about property in the second and the eighth house opposition. Now, if they're fighting about that, most likely what would happen is they would try to fight like one against the other, right? This guy's here, this guy's, yeah, and they both want to get more taller or whatever that is. So they're going to try to fight like this. Let me show you my face more. Yeah, so you've got like, yeah, you got these two people. Okay, this is here the Mars and this is the Venus. Yeah, if they try to fight like this as an opposition, everybody's going to be seeing the fight, and there's going to be interference from outside entities. There's going to be so much that's going to happen that you do not want. So what I kind of did was, this is my, what's my hand shaking? Yeah, that's my Venus and that's my Mars. So instead of fighting like this, what did the Mars do? It kind of just surrendered. So when it surrendered, it gave up its need to exist in a plane where it has to fight Venus. It just surrendered. And so when it surrendered, what happened is it got sucked in by something which was waiting for food. That was Pluto. It got sucked into the roots. And if you are to see these two as oppositions here, when something gets sucked into the root, it goes to the very bottom, right? And from this bottom, from this Pluto, that energy could just get easily transferred in the form of nutrition into the Venus. That's kind of what happened. It's kind of how I did it, or you can say that's how it, yeah, that's kind of how that took place, to the point where now I don't feel the opposition at all. And in my adult chart, is not there at all. The opposition just isn't there. Now, for some of more advanced astrology people, or you would say some of the more curious ones, would have noticed, but man, you never mentioned about this guy out here. What about this red line, right? Like, what about this part? There's a full triangle out here, which I never mentioned. Now, there's a very interesting way to look at this as well. Now, this part, which you can see the red one, is the part where if you went through this part, it would have been a little bit more tougher to do. Why? Because the lines are red, which means the energies are at loggerheads with each other. They're not exactly opposing, but they're square energies. That means they're like, tangent and like really fighting and like really instigating and like really stimulating and really pushing. So it's not the best angle to take. That is why I kind of took the other angle, but I will explain this angle as well. If you look at this angle, there's a very interesting combination here. Mars is in Cancer. Moon is in Aries. Are we seeing something? Mars rules Aries. Moon rules Cancer. Now, if you have something like this can really, you just need to understand the dynamics inside the chart and know that you don't actually have to do anything to worry about this. Ideally, or generally, people tend to worry about the red lines, the squares, because they are difficult. But in this case, if you are to just look a little bit deeper, you would be able to drive or derive the common sense behind it. The common sense behind it lies that if Moon rules Cancer and Mars rules Aries, and both of them are in each other's houses. Yeah, Mars is sitting in Cancer, Moon is sitting in Aries. Now imagine this in a and they've got this red line. Okay, so they're angry at each other. They are angry. They're not exactly pleased with each other. They are angry at each other because they're at a square with each other. Yeah, so they're at 90 degrees with each other. So that's why I said it's a tangent. Yeah, they're at 90 degrees with each other. They're not very happy with each other. They're both trying to stimulate each other to take action. Now, in this case, why you don't want to touch this at all is, imagine I'm in your house and you're in my house. Okay, in me living in your house, I have not paid you rent. I have not paid you anything for the last some months. I've just not done it at all. And you are living in my house. Okay, you were paying me, but seeing the fact that I didn't pay you, you have kind of decided to stop as well. Now here, say the story goes even more violent after that, and we both threaten each other. We threaten to break the furniture in each other's houses. Like I threatened that, I'm going to break your TV, and I've got a club in my hand. I've got a club in my hand, and I'm threatening you over the phone or over a video call, right? That I'm going to be, smashing your TV if you do something in my house. If you do something, yeah, if you cause any damage in my house, your TV is like getting smashed right here in front of me. So what happens is both the people don't take any action because they know that the other person has complete right or is in a position to completely damage your house. So it's not that they did it in a peaceful way. It's not that Mars and Moon here resolve the problem in a peaceful way. No, they did not do it peacefully. It happened in a kind of strategic point where nobody could take action. Why? Because I'm standing with a club, like Mars is standing with a club in Moon's house. And it's saying, you do anything in the house of Aries, and your TV's gone right now. I'm smashing it. And Moon out there in Aries is kind of, is not able to take action on Mars in Cancer for not paying rent. It's not able to take action. Or now they at least have to come to a compromise. Or even if they do not compromise, they just do not take action. They do not take a negative action against the other. Why? Because they know that their possessions are in the other person's hands. So it's kind of working out in a, I would say, tricky situation, but that's what astrology is. In a certain way, it's like chess. You need to kind of see which energies you do not need to touch because they will not touch each other as well. You do. In this situation, like a lot of people, when they see squares, they see these red lines. That's what I'm saying. Like for those of you who are unfamiliar with the terms, when you see red lines, it's generally an alarming sign that you need to, resolve that or you need to do something about it. But you need to see the whole picture. How many other lines are involved along with these red lines? When you see this here, this red line is that both of these are not going to do anything to each other because they have too much at stake. They will not destroy each other. They just let it be. So what happens is this becomes a very stable point. This becomes a very stable triangle in this kite. This side, house number 4, 8, and 2 becomes extremely stable because nobody's going to take any action. That is the perfect time for me to surrender my Mars, take it to Pluto and Scorpio, and from there, inject it in a very beautiful blue line, all my assets transferred to my bank account in Capricorn, my Venus. And I have my pretty things the way I like it, the way I design it. I've taken out all of my assets from other people's joint possessions, which I did not like. As I said, as this was done strategically or with a little bit of awareness, it happened very smoothly. Because generally, when you see a chart with a lot of lines like these, or at least opposing lines at each other, it's generally seen as a scary sign. It's in the way that you think either you're doomed, or you think like there's no way out, or you're just trying to fight those energies. There is always a way out. There's always a way out. Because when planets are up against each other, there's an equation going on. You need to see what the equation is, and you will be able to solve it. As I mentioned in the last episode, that something extremely funny came up after that. Is an opposition which was not there in my birth chart ended up showing up in my adult chart in the term of a Sun versus Pluto versus Saturn versus Mercury opposition. Like crazy. So we'll get into that on a later stage. But as a primer of how do you deal with an opposition, this is kind of how I did it. If you guys would like to share your oppositions or are just curious to know about them, you could just put in an example. You could just say like Uranus opposite Mars, or Venus opposite Neptune in house number this and this, in sign this and this. And yeah, I could break it down for you and you can take it from there. Or I could go a little bit more into positions in this coming series. So let's see how that goes. Otherwise, I'm going to be jumping in to the next opposition. That is the Sun versus Pluto versus Saturn versus Mercury, which happens in my adult chart, which I never saw, which wasn't there in the birth chart. None of those lines are there. They show up somewhere else. This is why you kind of need to see all your charts. You need to see your higher harmonic charts as well. Now that's advanced astrology, but yes, I hope you gain something out of this, and I'll see you soon. And if you want to get a reading done by me, the thing is, I do readings for free because I've been given so much by the universe with exactly what I want. So I feel it's knowledge which should be shared. So that's why I do it for free. But I also do it in conjunction with the high ticket sale business that I work with. I'm a music composer, and there's a high ticket sales offer which kind of supports me to follow my passions, stay on track, not do any projects which I do not like. So this high ticket sales business is a great opportunity for entrepreneurs, for anybody who's remotely creative or visionary, to go ahead and take the plunge into following their dreams and passions and figuring out what they're here on earth for. So as the part of the business call, I do offer astrology consultation as well, if they are keen on it, to try to see what is the angle of business you want to come in at. Like how I broke this chart down. How can you strategically break your chart down in a way that you choose the right kind of marketing strategies, in a way that you go about entering your entrepreneurial journey or developing one which you're already in a very strategic way, so that you do not do things which are not necessary, and you also do some things which are very specific for you, your chart, and the way things play out in your life, which is very different from your neighbor. So taking cookie cutter business classes or taking cookie cutter marketing classes or reading things online do help. I do that as well. But when you know something more specific about yourself and about how your energies work, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, it really does help to take the best choices in life, in work, in career, and yeah, your relationships as well. So I do offer astrology along with that. So if there's anything else you'd like to know, just hit me a comment or just go on my music website. Everything's there. The astrology as well, the business as well, and of course my music and my writings. And yeah, you'll discover everything about me as well. This human being, or whatever you want to call that, sitting in front of you and talking, or decided to have come on social media to share what is going through my mind. So, otherwise, I will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.